Hello, I'm Mario Toneguzzi, managing editor of Canada's podcast, Taking Care of Business today with Christopher Alexander, president of RE/MAX Canada. Thanks, Chris, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Mario. Good to be here.
Nice to see you. And a new report has come out from RE/MAX on industry trends to take a look for and keep an eye out on for this year. The first one I want to talk about is the kind of the optimism and what buyers and sellers are thinking about when it comes to real estate in this country. And the report shows 32% are optimistic that the market is moderating and it's regaining balance. Can you talk a little bit about that and why that's important?
Well, from the data, 32% of Canadians, as you mentioned, are optimistic. There's been a number of contributing factors to that. First of all, I think Canadians are very savvy. They are typically well-educated, at least the average homeowner, well-educated. They research their investment. Purchasing a home is typically the biggest financial transaction people make in their lifetimes. And so along with that, people really do their research. And if you look at Canada as a whole over the last, since they started tracking the data, real estate appreciates over time. And I think it's not difficult to see that the trajectory that we're on today it has a lifespan, much like the hot markets of 2021 did as well. They were going up like crazy, and then they calmed down in a big way heading into 2022. So generally speaking, Canadians are well versed. They understand that real estate is a long-term investment, especially if they want appreciation, and I think that gives them really good optimism going forward.
Okay, how would you characterize the market this year? I know that in the last year it was pretty active, and what can we expect? Obviously everything's different regions, but on the whole, what would you expect from the real estate market this year in Canada?
Well, to answer the first part of the question, what are we experiencing now? There's only really one word to describe it: bizarre. When you look across the country, it's fascinating. I mean, all you're hearing in major media outlets is doom and gloom, prices coming down, sales falling. For the most part, that's accurate. But why it's so bizarre is that despite all that, the inventory levels are so incredibly low, and so many different institutions, banks, mortgage companies have predicted a huge swath of inventory coming to the market because of the increase in rates and people not being able to afford their mortgages. That to this date hasn't materialized like many have predicted. So inventory levels are at historic lows. Ontario, for example, you're at a 14-year low when it comes to housing inventory, and the population has grown by several million people over that span. And still, you have demand outpacing the supply. And so I am hearing in Vancouver, in Calgary, Edmonton, Toronto, parts of the Maritimes, there is competing offers happening. And people are paying over asking. It's not 10, 20, 30% over, but they're still getting more than list in a lot of cases. And so that's why it's so bizarre, Mario. So looking ahead, it's hard to predict, but what my hunch has been for the last few months is that once the Bank of Canada that demonstrates in reality or in real time that they are done raising rates, at least for the foreseeable future, I think people are going to jump back in a big way. And that's looking like that. I mean, inflation reports that came out yesterday were, inflation is on its downward trajectory. So that's going to give pause for the Bank of Canada as well.
All right. Now, you mentioned the low inventory, Chris, and that's one of the Uh, I guess topics that the industry has been dealing with for quite a number of years now, I guess, and with a supply issue there. And we're getting more and more people coming to Canada. 500,000. For immigration. That's going to put a squeeze on the housing supply. How important is it that this country starts, I guess, developing new housing units out there to meet the demand that's there?
It's the most critical issue facing Canadian housing today and into the future. And that may feel or sound dramatic, but it is true. Our housing shortage and development challenges are real. We are already in a crisis stage, and it will take a deep concerted effort from all three levels of government to sort that out. We've got an incredible amount of red tape getting projects approved. We have a labor shortage that is only going to get tighter. And I am very concerned that we're getting very, very close to runaway territory when it comes to the housing shortage that we're in today.
Mm. And when you look at buyers in the market out there, or potential buyers, what are their main concerns, top concerns right now about buying and entering into the market?
Affordability, inflation are the two biggest, and you can loop in mortgage rates and just the rising cost of everything into that affordability factor. I mean, yes, inflation is coming down, but groceries are still sky high, up 12% year over year.
Yeah.
So that's hitting everybody. I mean, I don't care how much money you make, you're leaving the grocery store like, what the heck, when you look at your bill. And that's a big concern for a first-time home buyer. There are a tremendous amount of markets that are, if you don't have help from the bank of mom and dad, which has been a big trend over the last several years, it's very, very expensive to afford a home. And we're now at the point in a lot of cases where, despite the lower prices, it still costs you more on a monthly basis than it would have at a higher price with the lower rate. So that's something to be very wary of or aware of as a first-time buyer.
Okay, super. Well, thanks very much, Chris, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Mario. Always a pleasure.
All right, that was Christopher Alexander, president of RE/MAX Canada. I'm Mario Toneguzzi, managing editor of Canada's podcast, Taking Care of Business. Thanks for joining us today.